Hi. A clear pattern seems to be emerging and it's getting stronger and stronger. And just like last week, there was a real sense of, you don't have to focus on the spiritual, be present, be here, open and have a look at the world and make your decisions with that which resonates with you. And this week, it very much continued in the same stream, and a strong voice came through all of them, which pretty much said, there's nothing wrong with you. To the culmination of the week, it was so wonderful because through the progression of the sessions, what really started to show is that at the end of the day, when you reflect back, whether you've done nothing or whether you've done something or whether whatever it is that took place that day, to be able to look back and go, who is that? Who is that does that? And the reflection was continuous in this process of okayness, because as you go through life, you meet these aspects. I know myself, if I knew when I was age 5 that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have just crawled back in a hole and said, But in stages and experiences and overcoming and making some really stupid decisions that then in the process of saying, okay, next, and moving forward, incredible capacity of self comes through. And we kind of call that the norm, so we don't see it anymore. And this week, it really wanted to have people see it. You know, I'm in a very lucky position where in the repeat of seeing beings and the messages being so clear, I hear it repeatedly. And therefore, it gets to be seen. And my sharing with you is so that in the sharing of this, you can also get to see it, which ultimately is the seeing of self. And the card that was pulled this week was self. So there's nothing wrong with you. And it started at the beginning of the week very much with somebody who was very much used to having things appear quite effortlessly and being in the flow and always meeting the right person at the right time, not necessarily for herself, so often for others that needed to meet her. It seemed to be the flow. And things would turn up and that wasn't happening. Something that's waiting to come into presence hasn't come into presence. So there was a feeling of, what am I doing? What's going on? What am I doing wrong? You know, a friend of mine who just purchased a home not long ago, took 5 years. And it's perfect. It has its own timing and there's nothing wrong with you. It's important to see that just because everything doesn't work out exactly as you imagined or wanted, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. So there's that process of how amazing to actually be present and meet the next moment and just ride with it and be in it with that consciousness. And what came up there was that not knowing is the norm. We don't always have to know. You know, we're clamoring for knowing, and no matter how much knowing we've got, there's so much that we didn't see coming. It's like we didn't know. And to have not knowing as the norm, you can meet what comes so much more effortlessly, and then reflect back and go, wow, who was that negotiated it that way, or that was able to be in the process of it that way? Who was that? What a great question. We are so much more than what we know. So it went to someone who came, and they actually couldn't see the unknown. And in not seeing the unknown and not knowing how to be with that, we look for excuses to not be present. And that can show up in 101 different ways. Getting sick, and literally manifesting feeling sick, because that's preferable to manipulate what you want to have the out of time with, rather than the unknown. And what was interesting in this situation was wonderful, actually, because it went into a future unknown as it is. There was a part that knew that what I do want there is a form of resilience for myself and those in my creative family, that they will not get hurt. Now, to not get hurt meant to bring through a capacity to have water run off a duck's back, to not allow others to impact to such an extent that it can take your energies down. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means there's compassion in that. But to be able to stand in that, because we do not know what the future is, but the capacity to stand in it with such resilience that we can have, that peace arrives within us, knowing we can do that. And again, when that happens, you could look back and go, who was that? Who was that stood in that? Who could just stay with it? It's so easy to go into past patterns, and because we really are not interested in a repeat story of what's been happening. You know, to begin with, that it might be nice to revisit in memory lane, but usually that's with observance, hindsight, and being able to laugh at things which at the time were not particularly fantastic. But there is also those hindsights that we just don't want to repeat it. We want nothing to do with it. And then it's important to step out of those patterns and to say, how do I move forward? How do I move forward? And actually see who you are, and also look at those patterns and see what worked, and then drop off what isn't valuable, but continue with what is valuable, because that was well earned. And who is that? And there is nothing wrong with you. Move forward into that which you prefer, that you know is excellent in your life, and what is in the flow, to the extent that you're so in the moment that time passes. There is no time when you're in that flow. Now, this sense just grew and grew with each session, and the next one was amazing. It's a woman who I have seen since the very beginning of when I started doing kinesiology, and I actually still remember the first session and many in between. And it was not an easy ride, not an easy ride in any shape or form. And over the decades, all these, and not necessarily fast, but eventually each aspect was moved through. And as each aspect was moved through and re-seen and reframed, a freedom came more and more and more and more and more. And it wasn't until retirement that the real blossoming actually began. That's a long time. And in piece of life and this youthfulness, this embracing of life showed up. And what showed up when we first started working was like the other side of the vibrational energy, which we call transitioning or passing over. That energy there was wanting to communicate to her, and it was communicating, "You are so awesome." It was like a cheering crowd of, "You are so awesome." It's epic what you have done and how you have come through. And it got that you weren't feeling it, but when you're on the other side, and we'll show it to you, you go, "Oh my God, that was extraordinary." Because with all the overcoming and overcoming really in a way is a form of freeing up, not making life more difficult and going for the next hard thing. No, it's a freedom in which you make the next choice in freedom to what you prefer and what gives you joy, and all of that was happening. But because it's so normal, we don't see it. We normalize it and it disappears. And there's nothing wrong with you, because what starts to happen in the non-seeing, you could have, say, let's call it this much. And over life, because what do we know when we're younger? And wise as we are, it's the discipline of the whole interaction and finding out who you are in the process. And that takes time, rather than the tantrum of want it now. So what happens is this goes and goes, and we grow, we overcome, we grow, we overcome. And through extraordinary aspects that all of us have, all of us. No one gets a free ride except the meeting of that and the opportunity to free yourself up. So what happens is we get to that, but that's normal. So what do? We look at that little bit and we go, something's wrong here, and in this area, we go to doctors, we find the latest treatment, we get the latest supplement, or we get the next exercise, or it's exhausting. But if you see you're here, and that's extraordinary, it's like, and there's nothing wrong with you. There was nothing wrong with you here. There's nothing wrong with you. There's a process of freeing up and liberating and becoming aware that there is nothing wrong with you. And then making your choices and being very clear whether those that are making you wrong are doing that for what they see as wrong. And then there are choices of you prefer to be with people or you don't prefer to be with certain people. We all find our own. There's nothing wrong. So in not seeing yourself, what happens in that, especially in the workplace, and especially those who have done that amount of work, when a lot haven't done that amount of work. They may have done that amount of work. And if they've only done that amount of work, of course you're the one that's got the gap. You're the one that has to change things. You're the one that has to shift things. But if you see yourself properly, and you see your capacity, and you see there's nothing wrong with you, there's an element of, I've got this. And then when you want to go for the next job description, you know you have it. And in the having of it and the seeing of it, it's important then to see the fallout of what's not quite working, because a lot of these beings are in management position where they're in charge of a lot of other people. And there are a lot of people who will make you the problem. Hmm? And when there, and you get that capacity, then you can see the fallout. And the fallout is not that area there where you want to fix it all. The fallout really is to see what it is and how you can address it and have them be responsible. Because often in these cases, those that you're managing, they may have been told 3-4 times and still they don't do it. That's a fallout. That needs to be addressed. And you're not necessarily the problem here. And when you can see it, the communication will be clearer that it's theirs, because very often those here make them the problem. They are not okay, we are. And there's nothing wrong with them either, you know? But it takes both sides seeing there is nothing wrong to be able to collaborate, whether it is parenting, whether it's in a relationship. It's this, there's nothing wrong with you as a baseline allows a conversation about fallouts to be addressed. So when we have that capacity in bulk, like some of the people that you and I meet, how they negotiate life and how they end up doing what they're doing, I cannot imagine how they do that, but necessity calls for it. And the growth is quite incredible, and we can end up mentally and emotionally exhausted. And then all that, achieving that, wanting that extra little bit and focusing on why isn't this still happening, takes away all that amazingness of there's nothing wrong with you, and who is this being that did all of that? And in the discussion we actually said, remember when you did X, Y, Z? God, how did you do that? And they said, well, I look back now and I go, I wouldn't even be able to do that now. But it was done. And if we can look at what we have done, and I know in my own life, a lot of what I have done came out of a mistake needing to be corrected, a mistake needing a mistake, a wanting to believe something rather than really look at what it was. And then eventually this needs a correction, and in the correction of it we grow a resilience. And who is that had that capacity? And to get to the end of the day and to be able to look back and go, who is that? And that is just as true if you wake up and you stay in your pajamas all day and do whatever you want and look back on it and go, who is that was able to do that? That is just as important as the most remarkable day that was so productive in the flow, and you look back and you go, who is that? So may you have many days of who is that? Because that is the beauty of the day, waking up not knowing what at the end of the day you can see and say, who is that? But one thing for sure, nothing is wrong with you. The card is self. The self remains true. The self remains pure. Your ego may be striving to take you away from the knowing of your whole self. Do not be troubled, do not be misled. And it was interesting because in the process of the sessions, very often the spirit was the one who saw this way of being, just like last week. Forget about the spirit. The spirit's always there. Get on with your life. Come on, get real. Stop all this this focus that is so heightened at the moment about spirituality, we can get lost in there and not be here. Be here. That is always there. But what showed up was this incredible connection to self that is so fully embracing of each day and the unknown and what's coming. And the mind kind of was saying, well, I can't do this. Because, you know, the mind needs to know. Anyway, it says, I can't do this. And it was great because the spirit goes, what's it got to do with you? You're a mind. So funny, because that came up a couple of times where the mind goes, I can't do this. And it's true, the mind can't. It is a capacity of self. Like, who is that? Who is that? It's that capacity. It's that you look back on, because it's not the mind. I'm not saying the mind hasn't got value, man, it does. But there are aspects that are not in its domain. Be Self is totally unlimited and is guided by your heart and soul. All you need to do is listen and trust yourself.